Hi everyone, it's Carol from the Barrie Public Library. Welcome back to my sewing room. I thought for today we'd make a quick and easy Christmas stocking. So I had made this one, and I used a heavier fabric. It's called Minky or Cuddle fabric, so I didn't bother with a lining for it because the fabric is heavy enough. But what we're going to use today is cotton, and so we'll do the stocking and the lining. It takes about a yard of fabric, meter of fabric, or you can get 4 fat quarters. They're available at any of the quilting shops, they're available at Fabricland, they're available online. So you can just pick out 4 that you like and you're good to go. I have a little bit of batting left over from other projects, so I'm going to show you how to do it with a little bit of quilting, but that step is completely unnecessary. You don't need to do it. Or a template, there's a lot of templates available online. You can just Google in free stocking patterns and it'll bring up templates. You can print them off and you're good to go. Or if you have a stocking at home, what I did was I took one of the stockings that we had from home, I placed it on the fabric, and I traced around. I placed my fabrics, this is the linings, so I placed them good sides, right sides together, then I laid the template down on top of the outside of both pieces, drew around it, and I left about 1/4 to 1/2 inch wider when I drew around the stocking, just so that it takes into account our seam allowance, and then our stocking will be this size. Then what I did, because I had some leftover batting, I placed my outside on. I'm just pinning it very quickly so that we can do a little bit of quilting. What I did, once I'd cut out my lining, I had some extra fabric left over, so I cut myself out a piece that was 6.5 inches, 7 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. And what I did was I folded that in half, and then I gave it a press, and then I took the outside edges and I folded them into where the crease was that I had pressed in. Now we're going to take it, we're going to fold it in half again. Just going to stitch down very close, about 1/8 of an inch from the outside edge, stitch down. What that will do is when we get further into the stocking, we'll fold it in half, tuck it in between the layers, and that is going to give us a hanger to hang our stocking on. If you've got a sewing machine, this is quick, quick, quick. If you don't have a sewing machine, you can still make the project, just stitching it by hand. It'll just take a wee bit longer. So we'll do that, and stitch back a couple of stitches, and away we go. Okay, so that's ready for later. And what I'm going to do, like I say, you don't need to do this. I'm going to just do a very quick quilting on this. I'm just going to stitch some straight lines, probably go on an angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start in one corner, and we will sew down the diagonal. Okay, so I'm just coming to the end of my quick quilting. All I've done is just quick little diagonal lines back and forth across. And just finish this up. And then what we'll do is we'll trim the batting so that it's even with the front and back of our fabric. And that last one we'll forward and back just to lock it in. Okay, so this is the other side. Now we'll clip it. So all I'm doing is just very quickly trimming the excess batting off from around our front and back pieces. Now, like I say, if you weren't quilting it, then you wouldn't have to worry about this step. You would just go from cutting out and making your little piece for your handle to the next step. I'm going to take a piece of our lining and a piece of our front, and we're going to stick them right sides together, and we're going to sew along this top edge to enclose everything. So you want to make sure that you have a front and a lining piece with the toes pointed in the same direction. We're going to take the little piece that we made for our loop, our handle, and we're going to tuck it. Move this so you can see it. We're going to tuck it in, so we're just folding it in half, and we're going to have the loop side facing down towards the toe. We're going to go in about 1.5 inches from the corner, and we're just going to pin that in place. Then we're going to take the top edge of our outside. We're going to line these edges up so our loop is tucked inside, and we're just going to stitch along this top edge with about 1/2 inch seam. So for both pieces, we're going to stitch together the inside and the outside just across the top. All right, let's get that done quickly. And where that loop is, I'm going to go over and back, forward and back a couple of times just to reinforce it so that it stays in place, and if somebody's picking up the stocking by the loop and there happens to be some stuff in it, it's not going to tear out. So let's just go forward and back over the loop a couple of times. And straight down. And when we get to the end, we'll just do a forward and back. And then let's do this other side as well. Okay, so that's sewn. So now what we're going to do is we're going to line everything up together, and it's as easy as we've got our back and our lining for our back, we have our front and our lining for our front, and all we're going to do is stick them together, pin around, make sure that this seam lines up with both of them for your front and your back, so that all lines up together. I'm going to pin all the way around, and we're going to stitch all the way around, but on the bottom of the lining, we're going to leave about a 4 or 5 inch, maybe a hand's width opening. So I'm just going to get everything pinned in place. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of our pinning. And if you've watched any of the other projects that I've done, you'll know that I'm a pinner. I probably use far more pins than I need to, but I like the fact that it keeps everything in place. So the seam from the outside is pointing to the left, and the seam from the lining is pointing to the right. So they just nest in together nicely. What I did was I placed a pin going in the opposite direction to all the others at the ending and the beginning of where we're going to stitch. And we're going to do it all with a 1/2 inch seam, just so that we have a good seam allowance all the way around. And then once we've stitched it all, we'll trim in where the curves are, just so that our seams lie flat. So let's get stitching. Forward and back a few times. And when you're stitching, if you can, leave your needle in the needle down position. That way, as you're turning around the curves, if you need to raise your presser foot, your needle is going to hold everything in place, and you're not going to lose where you are sewing. When you're stitching around, where your loop is, make sure you don't catch your loop in the side seam that we're doing now. Make sure that it's pushed towards the center of the stocking. Okay, so we're coming down the home stretch. So the nice thing about doing it this way is that you don't have any open or exposed seams. Nothing's going to fray because all your seams are tucked inside. It's like you're doing, they're called French seams when it's all sewn inside. Just doing some forward and back to reinforce that. And we're done. Now where these curves are, on both the lining and the outside, we're just going to make some little snips, and we want to snip not into the seam but close to the seam that we've just sewn. Maybe, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch apart. And that way everything lies flat. So I'm just making the last few snips. So now we're going to reach into the opening that's in our lining, and we're going to reach all the way down to the toe on the inner and outer part, and we're going to pull it all through this hole. Here we go. So just going to pull it out, make sure that our seams are good. What you can do is you can reach down inside and just run your hand, your fingers, along the edge of the seam just to make sure that it's all pushed out all the way around. And you can do that along the inside of the lining as well. There we go. So now we have our little opening here, and we're just going to stitch that shut. I want to do a forward and back on the beginning and end of this seam, so we don't want any loot falling out of the stocking and inside of it. Gosh, that wouldn't be a good thing, would it now? So we're just going to close this up. Now, because we had done a 1/2 inch seam all the way around, if we sew this at about 1/4 of an inch, then that makes sure that we catch both edges of the front and the back of the lining. Where our lining and our stocking meet, we are going to push the lining into our stocking and push it right into the toe. And right in at the top. So we're just going to do this one last seam, just sewing, and I'm going to sew it about 1/2 inch all the way around the top. And we are done our Christmas stocking, Christmas present, or maybe it's just a stocking for you, and that's all right too. You can use them to decorate, you can use them to fill, Santa can fill them. Quick, easy, simple Christmas stocking that you can keep for yourself, you can give to a friend, you can give to a family member. Very personal little Christmas gift. Have fun, enjoy, and we'll see you in the sewing room again soon. All right. For the Barrie Public Library, this is Carol. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.